Good morning to you, Collin. How are you?
That introduction is like, if he isn't absolutely fantastic, he's a complete failure. So the bar is set so high now. But
it's
thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
it's good to see you from Collin Wilson for the Action Network. It's just, by the way, I love your background. By the way, that is amazing. What? Tell me, can you give me an idea what went into this?
Yeah, it's crazy. I told my dad, I was like, listen, I'm going to be on camera and no one wants to look at the grill. So I need a really nice background. And my dad builds houses in Northwest Arkansas, right around Razorback Stadium. And he said, you know what? I can build you a cubby shelf. You can stick helmets in it. We can put some LED lights. I was like, Dad, I don't know. Like, this is like my dad's fantasy to build something for his son. So he builds this cubby hole. He fills it with lights, and I can change these colors and everything. And was happy enough to have the Action Network sign, so got it all together, and it looks great. Other than I don't have a Texas helmet in there because my Arkansas roots, my Arkansas grandparents would probably kill me if I had anything Texas in this house.
But however, you're not Texas adverse when it comes to talking about the Longhorns or your predictions or anything to that effect. I think you've been pretty high on them. But give me your thought process before we talk about Kansas game. Give me your thoughts on what you've seen from Texas so far this season. I'm assuming you probably watched the Alabama game, probably hadn't really dug deep into Rice or Wyoming, but with what you've seen, what's been your impression so far?
Well, the Rice game really threw me off because Rice had like 10 tackles for loss. They were in the backfield. They challenged that Texas offensive line that entire game. Really confused me because Texas couldn't get their run game going, and I didn't have Rice front seven on my bingo card as being any kind of problem, but they gave Texas some problems there. And it turns out Rice is just really good. I know they lost their game last week, but JT Daniels got hurt, but they've been really good in the trench and on the defensive line. And you have to think that Texas was just overlooking to Alabama because they were fantastic against Alabama in the trench. They dominated that offensive line. Quinn Ewers has been, almost flawless. He only has one turnover-worthy play so far this year. I know it's his 9 TDs and no interceptions, but he's been mistake-free. And the fact that Texas is able to line up in Tuscaloosa, drain clock, and run the ball is really all you need to know that this team is a national title contender.
I mean, have you ever seen something like that with a team go on the road in Tuscaloosa? I mean, he only had Saban only had 8 losses at home going into the game. And to your point, like the Texas goes and they go into that and be able to kneel down at the end of the game and that victory formation. Had you ever seen that too often, or have it that doesn't really happen that often?
No, I mean the only way to beat Bama is if you get into a shootout with them, because sometime around a decade ago, Nick Saban's like, forget it. I think running the ball and grinding the Trent Richardson 3 yards of cloud of dust that's over with, and we got to go to a spread. And then in 2020, during the pandemic season, you see just how lethal they were with Mac Jones and Devonta Smith. And that was the new blueprint for all teams in college football. So for Texas to come in there and own the trench is different than anybody else has ever done to Alabama. And to me, it's like somebody that follows recruiting. Like I think of Tommy Brockenmeyer, right? A kid that grew up in the state of Texas, was, just family, lifelong Texas Longhorns. And he decides in his recruiting process to go to Alabama because he thought it gave him the best chance to get to the pros. Well, look at it today. The Texas offensive line and defensive line dominated Alabama in a game. I mean, it's just such a flip what Sark's been able to do to get the recruits and to get them to execute.
So you mentioned the word natty, and I know we're 4 games in. So first and foremost, I've had a slight gripe, and I want to get your opinion on this from the polls. Okay, for the teams that are ranked ahead of Texas, do any one of them have in 2023, not in 2022, not in 2021, not in the past? Does any one of them have a quality win on their schedule that the same way that Texas does? Because I think a case can be made that they should be number 1 based off of 2023, but it doesn't seem like everyone's on with that. It still seems like they're holding on to the past.
It's kind of this thing where people don't want to admit that Texas is good because they feel like they're going to get burned. And this is the one. I mean, when I met you a year ago, Anwar, over a year ago at Media Days, I said, is Texas back? I don't know. And then they put up all these great numbers. I came strolling into Media Day and told everybody, get your money down. The Longhorns are going to dominate this conference. They're going to challenge for a national title. And it's just because they've completely exceeded all expectations from a statistical standpoint. They are just much better than everybody else. And who else has a signature win up? up in that top 8. And I know AP voters are kind of fickle, right? They don't want to get burned for picking Texas and everything. But right now, there legitimately is 11 teams that could win the national title, and Texas is right at the front.
So right now, I'm kind of curious. You know, you saw Sark obviously year one, 5-7. Year one, you see the 8. So what about you? Are you a believer? Do you need to see a little bit more for you to say? Because I know they're in the hunt now, but do you think they've got some staying power based off anything you see or data or anything to that effect?
No, they are following up what they did last year. Right now, they are a top 10 defense and two areas that I handicap big time, which is quality drives and finishing drives. How often are you letting your opponent get down the field? Well, they're top 10 and not allowing that. And they're top 10 in finishing drives, which says, what does your opponent do once they score the 40-yard, get past the 40-yard line? How many points are they scoring? Texas is one of the best in the nation in some of the advanced metrics that I look at, both offensively and defensively. And the fact that they've been able to trim their mistakes on the offensive side, even without Bijan Robinson. I mean, trying to find a running back there to replace him. Quinn Ewers' progression. There's just a lot less mistakes being made by this team. I absolutely think they're national title contenders, and you got to have explosive wide receivers, and they have 2 of them. So they're definitely players.
What is your thoughts on not on Kansas and Texas? They play this upcoming week. Two teams that are ranked, 2 teams that are 4-0. They've got Jalen Daniels, as obviously as we know, their defense is better than they have been in the past on Kansas. It's not just a Jalen Daniels thing, but you've seen Texas and you also seen their defensive line and what they've been able to attack. That I'm just kind of curious give me your breakdown of that game this upcoming weekend.
So Kansas is one of the toughest handicaps to put together when I break down games. And that's because on the offense, you just can't put numbers against numbers and say, well, this is what's going to happen. Because what Lance Leipold does is he uses an extreme amount of motion. Every single snap, there's guys moving all over the place in pre-snap. And the reason why teams like Iowa State have so much success against that is because they don't move anybody in their secondary. Motion is a way that offenses use so the defenses can tip their hand in coverage and show the quarterback pre-snap what's going to happen. So if you stay still, you don't give that read to Jalen Daniels, and you can keep him, if your edges can keep him in the pocket, then you can dominate him. Now, I say all that because this is what happened last year, and Texas won 55-14. Jalen Daniels could only make good plays and passing downs when he was behind schedule. And even then they were dump offs and his targets did a lot of the work. So I think Texas is built defensively to not fall for the motion. They didn't last year. And they're built to have their edges contain Jalen Daniels. And that is the key to covering that whopping spread of 17.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that 17 seemed a lot to me. Is that something that you feel good about, that 17? Or is that a little bit too much?
No, my numbers made it 18.5. And I think I think SP Plus made it 19.5. So I would say there's some meat on the bone here, especially with some 16.5s in the market, that there is value on betting Texas. And yeah, Kansas, there's some gripes that I have with Kansas. First off, they played the 121st strength of schedule this year. I mean, BYU, Nevada, Illinois, Missouri State. I mean, it's just not murderer's row what they're doing. But the one thing that I have a problem with is I mentioned the stat finishing drives, and that's how many points do you score when you have the opportunity? And Kansas's defense is second to last in the nation in allowing teams to convert touchdowns once they get past the 40. That's even worse when I just tell you the teams that they played, Nevada, Illinois, Missouri State, those offenses were able to generate that many touchdowns. I think there's some hidden stats here that say that Texas can easily get a touchdown every time they go down the field and cover this spread.
Wow. Okay. So if I know about Texas at this moment, let's go outside. Let's go outside. Give me who's the second best team in the Big 12 right now in your opinion?
That was a question I had in July. I'm like, all right, I had no problem putting Texas over the top. Who is team number 2? Because everyone thought it was going to be Texas Tech, but they analytically they have fallen off the map. They have just not been there whatsoever. But that was the hot name back in the summer. Kansas State not having as much success in the trench. Oklahoma State, Iowa State just engulfed in so many quarterbacks and problems and off the field. It's tough. I mean, at this point, I don't know who you're putting up in that second slot. I'm open for interpretation because Baylor is having massive holes at offensive line and secondary. You're not going to win any games when you have problems there. Yeah. To me, I mean, it's going to be Oklahoma, which I didn't believe in Oklahoma either. And we saw how they punted like 7 times in a row against SMU's defense. I'm still not a true believer in Oklahoma, but by default, it looks like Oklahoma's going to be the number 2 team.
That's what does that make Brett Yormark's head explode if he has the Texas and OU in the Big 12 championship game at that point?
He just wants to call Dion and say, "Can you pack your bags, get in here to the Big 12 now? Maybe fill in that spot so our halftime show's huge. Bring all those sideline guys down." So Brett Yormark's going to throw a big party at the Big 12 championship. He probably wants a better game.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you 2 more, and I'll let you get out. And speaking of Dion, what do your numbers and metrics show you about Colorado? Obviously, last week happened. Oregon did happen. Is that the sign of things to come based off of what you've seen?
I knew it was coming with Oregon because Oregon is a machine at home. Bo Nix never makes a mistake. It's the number 1 offense in terms of, I said, quality drives, finishing drives. They're number 1 in the nation by far, and no one goes to Autzen and gets away with it. That being said, I am pretty loaded up on Colorado to cover above 21.5 this weekend against USC because USC is the most penalized team in the country, and they cannot get out of their own way. And their defense, they've played the 130th strength of schedule, and they allowed Arizona State to go up and down the field and score some points. I think Colorado has a real chance to trade explosive play with explosive play. Caleb and Shedeur just going back at each other. I like Colorado to cover that number.
Is there anything else that you love going into this weekend?
Arkansas and Texas A&M is the Southwest Classic. I miss the Southwest Conference. I grew up on that. But, in this game, you're going to see a lot of explosive plays, but the defense is really what makes this game an over game is because both defenses are heavy on havoc. They like to attack the quarterback. They have tackles for loss, but both of them are giving up massive explosive plays. Think about what BYU did to Arkansas. Think about what Miami did to Texas A&M. There's going to be some big plays here. They're not going to move the chains. It's not going to be methodical. It's going to be just explosive plays and sacks. So I like the over in that game.
All right. Last thing, Collin, I'll let you get out. Who's your top 4 right now? Who's your top 4? If you got your bowl projections and we got CFP projections, who do you got right now?
Well, I leave the bowl stuff to Brett because he gets such a bad reaction from people when they get the potato bowl. Yeah, I don't want to touch this file. I got Georgia, Texas, Penn State, and Washington. And those are – I don't think anybody could put any holes into that scenario being the college football playoff right now. They all come from different conferences. They're all dominating right now. Georgia, we're going to find out a lot more about. Their defense, I think, is asleep at the wheel like they were last year.
All right, Collin Wilson, tell everyone how they can find you and everything that you guys are doing. A great content over at the Action Network, which, by the way, looks backwards when you're on screen. So just want to throw that out there. But yes, for those of us who are not dyslexic, tell us more about the Action Network.
Yeah, so if you flip it around, it says Action. But yeah, you can go to actionnetwork.com. My Twitter handle is @_Collin1, Collin. I do the Big Bets on podcast with my partner Stuckey. We cover every game from Texas and Alabama all the way down to New Mexico State. If there's an angle, we're going to attack it. So you can find that BBOC podcast over at the Action Network.
All right, guys, you guys go support him. He was good. I told you he'd be good. You lived up to it, Collin. I promise I won't talk nasty about you once you get off the show. You did fantastic, and thank you for coming on. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Anwar. See you soon.
All right, take care.